Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we're tracking the windows in your mind and the loot in Norman Jewison's 1968 heist flick, The Thomas Crown Affair.
Let's start with the money.
Well, I don't have it.
No, what would you do if you did?
We're in this together. You want it in. You're going to get 10%. So you earn your keep.
$2,600,000 in cash.
Whose head are you after?
Yours.
Mine.
Yours.
Let's play something else. Go.
Andy, Thomas Crown Affair. It's got the Steve McQueen. The Steve McQueen is in it.
Stephen Queen. We should just do everyone's names wrong. This has Stephen Queen
and Faye Dunaway. So this is we're still in our 1968 kick for the rest of the year, and this one is it kicks off a new series that we're doing of movies that are shorter than the movies we did on our last series.
Is that the name of it? It should be the name of the series.
Yes,
you could probably add the running time of all four of these movies, and it's shorter than Once Upon a Time in America.
Yes. This series is much less intimidating than the last series that we did, but we got through it and we feel great about it. And now we're talking about movies and their remakes. We're starting here with Thomas Crown Affair, 1968, of course, the remake that we'll be talking about later in 1999. On this film, Andy, what is your relationship with this film and its relationship to the time?
I came to this film fairly late in the game, actually. I think I finally watched it when I knew they were making a remake. And it piqued my curiosity, and I wanted to see it, and I rented it and checked it out. And I've always kind of enjoyed it. I think it's a fun movie. I like the heist. I like the relationship between McQueen and Dunaway. And I like the style that Jewison brings to it. As far as tying it into the times, it's a trickier film to find a direct connection to the times. It's kind of a film about, a bank heist by a millionaire, and it's not kind of tying into the tension going on in the 60s from the war and all of that. But it does have that kind of jazzy, loose feel in the filmmaking style that Jewison employs here. And I guess, if anything, I would say that gives a sense of kind of the period of where this film takes place and how it kind of fits into the 60s, especially the filmmaking style and especially the fantastic multi-screen image that is employed throughout, from the opening titles and through the robberies and the polo scene and all that sort of stuff. That is a really fantastic technique that Jewison employs in the film, and it, I think, to a certain extent, really helps kind of pin, to a certain extent, kind of that jazzy filmmaking style that I think that there's a hint of kind of the way that it was born in the French New Wave, and then the way that it kind of comes through here, I think, is actually really nice. And so I wouldn't say it pins it as a 1968 film, but certainly there's a style to it that has a 60s vibe to it.
Oh, yeah. And, you watch this movie and you think, oh, I saw this movie when Soderbergh aped it in Ocean's 11. You know what I mean? I mean, it has it's very much stylistically vintage. It's something that other filmmakers have clearly taken from when you're talking about how the movie was made cinematically. It just has a look to it that you have seen before. And, a lot of that can be traced here. And to other films kind of this period, as they were experimenting with a lot of the technology that was changing in how to actually put image on the screen, which is fascinating. Culturally, though, I think this film is almost more notable for the opportunities that it passed up in actually making any sort of statement about, as you say, the strife and conflict going on around the world. Certainly, the any sort of deeper kind of implication of the merits of wealth in society. This movie lives in the 1%, and we do see poverty in the film, but there is, I mean, it only insofar as it exists. Like, nobody's really struggling because they don't have because they're not wealthy. They just exist, and their cars aren't Rolls Royces or Ferraris, and they don't dune buggy up the Massachusetts coast. But yes, the poor are there, and so it's a film that just sort of exists in its own frivolity, and that celebrates that there's a really wealthy guy. I like it. I like the style of it, and I certainly like Steve McQueen's portrayal of it. But I also think that's kind of where the movie, where it dates itself. That there are much deeper arguments or discussions going on right now in film, even the fun ones. That this film was just sort of too early to have. I think, like, not that I'm faulting Norman Jewison or Alan Trustman, screenwriter, for not having a deep cultural conversation, but just I think it would look different today, and I look forward to talking more about that later
Certainly. But that's not to say that every movie needs to be that connected to the social zeitgeist and everything that's happening and making a statement. I think it's fine
It
to have.
certainly doesn't.
I think it's fine to have a fun film, and I think they do a good job with it. Now, you're right. I think there is an element to what you're saying that does reflect on how people saw the film at the time and might still see it today. It's not like this is one that's constantly getting re-released or anything. But even at the time when it came out, I mean, Roger Ebert said it's possibly the most underplotted, underwritten, over-photographed film of the year, which is not to say it isn't great to look at. It is. And I think that there's a little bit of a point to that. I don't completely agree with him. I think it's more than just fun to look at. I think it is a fun film, but it does end up feeling like there's a little more style over substance. But for me, that also kind of ties to like the stuff that other filmmakers do with these kind of heist movies. I mean, look at Soderbergh. Look at those types of films. Sometimes it's just fun to just make a stylish film and just have fun with it.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And so then, on the merits of this film and of the heist, how well does it hold up?
The heist itself is actually I guess it's a pretty chunky portion of the open. It's done in a really fun way, and it again, they employ that multi-image technique throughout to allow us to see everything that's going on. I think the actual robbery itself, I saw some statistic about it's only like 3 minutes of screen time, like the actual robbery, or maybe it's a little more than that, but somewhere around there. But it's actually like, if you take all the shots apart and you put it all out, it's actually about 15 minutes of straight film, the way that the story would have been unfolding. And so by playing with the heist and letting us kind of see it where everything's going on at the same time, but doing it in a way where sometimes images would blur a little bit, it really allows you to kind of focus. And I found it really easy to follow, but really exciting to kind of see the heist play out that way. I thought it was a really fresh and original take on a heist.
I did too. I really enjoy it, and that first 26 minutes, right? That's after the heist, and there's all the interstitial stuff, and there's cops and all that kind of stuff. But by the time Crown pulls into his house and goes into his house and sits down on his couch, he hits the driveway right about 26 minutes, and that's a long stretch of film. And I think they actually do a great job of setting up the world through the heist, right? They don't tell us, they don't give us a lot early on, and they expect, I think, a lot of us in that first 25-minute stretch to just start tracking. You need to start tracking the fact that in our very first sequence, we have our, some invisible hand is starting to hire people who don't know who he is to take part in a heist at some point in the future. And I think all of that skeleton of the heist is really cool, that the building a team starts at minute zero. I have a lot of fun with that. In fact, I think that the heist is really one of the more interesting heists of the heist movies we've seen, the way it's portrayed on screen. The rest of the movie then unravels in two ways. One, we have the kind of criminal pursuit, and two, we have the relationship pursuit between Thomas Crown and Vicki Anderson, played by Faye Dunaway. And I can see where Ebert would say this was underwritten. I really struggle. As much as I love Dunaway in this film, and I actually really enjoy her character alongside Steve McQueen, and trying to keep up with the weird relationship mechanics that they're, trying to play with here. I think the actual criminal pursuit is really thin. I just don't buy it. And there is a particular scene with, the police officer, the detective, Eddie, and Vicky in the park, where they just magically seem to understand everything that was going on in the film without giving the audience any chance to kind of ride along. And I think that sort of gift of the heavens of, here's the answer to the heist. I get it now, with no trail is really where this film suffers. It's hard to kind of replay it, which is one of the things we constantly talk about. How well can you keep up as a member of the audience?
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, but I get what they were doing. The story isn't about solving the case, and that is probably too fast, too unbelievable, and unfortunate the way that scene plays out, because the story requires that Vicky figures it out quickly, because the story is really about this kind of cat and mouse game that she plays with Steve McQueen through the rest of the film. So she has to get in touch with him right away, so that can happen. And I guess it's one of those things where you just got to kind of buy into that moment and move past it so that you can get to all of the rest of it. And you're right. I mean, it's a little thin, but I guess for me, it really falls to the chemistry between Dunaway and McQueen, and watching the pair of them, just the way that they interact and the conversations they have, I think ends up being a lot of fun, even if some of the lines and some of the writing is a little, I don't want to say inert, but maybe it's not necessarily great writing. But I still just love their chemistry. And like right from the first scene when she reveals that she's investigating him, and she just flat out tells him, yeah, I'm investigating you. And they have that exchange. It's fun. There's this flirtation that goes along with all of it that I have a lot of fun with. Even if I guess you could say these are really immoral characters that we're following, both of them.
That is one of the more interesting angles for me, is her role and kind of Eddie's role, that, as they're, working under the auspices of investigating as a function of the insurance company. And so they are out from under the thumb of legal obligation.
She is.
That's right. Right. That's what I mean. So she's out from under that sort of thumb of legal obligation, and can pretty much do whatever her character would allow her to do, her sort of moral character. And she's very open about the fact that she's in it for the money. And it turns out and I think that's an interesting stand. And I think that her position is, as she becomes more and more emotionally compromised in her, her relationship with him, it's interesting to watch her navigate that as he's trying to navigate out from under, these supposed IRS, loopholes that she's exercising against him. So that part I really like. I have a hard time letting go of the fact that the investigation is as kind of weak as it is. Because I don't know, for this movie, I compare the relationship stuff to a movie like Out of Sight, which I think did it very, very well. The cop versus criminal relationship, they come together and they have to somehow navigate their own archetypes, and I think they did it very well. This movie, to me, is not as strong in that area, and so it's kind of a middling. It ends up being kind of middling for me in that regard. I don't know.
I get it. I mean, I get what you're saying. And because I see the same problems. I think the Out of Sight comparison is a great one, actually, because that one is handled extremely well. But it's also like a film from the 90s, and I think that it had 30 more years of filmmaking storytelling to kind of put behind it, and of course Soderbergh as well.
It also had Elmore Leonard. Like, it had an incredible book behind it,
Yeah, I think it had a lot of stuff going for it. This was crafted by a lawyer, Alan Trustman, who he was a lawyer, and he actually worked in this building across from the First National Bank of Boston. And he knew how the bank ran and all that sort of stuff. And he came up with this whole story of this robbery and came up with this script. And it was a good enough script to sell and to get made. And I mean, even, he did rewrites when they signed McQueen on, And McQueen loved it so much, he said, I don't know how, but the son of a bitch knows me. Somehow Trustman seemed to kind of get a grasp of who McQueen was. But I still think that perhaps some of the failings of the script itself come from the fact that he was coming at it from, kind of outside of the world of writing and didn't have as fine-tuned a grasp on the storytelling tools he needed to really flesh it out and give a little more meat that clearly some people are looking for with this.
Well, it's funny about Trustman, too, that he ended up having an amazing, 5-year career as an attorney, right? And then screenwriter to start with this film with Steve McQueen, to have such a relationship with McQueen to go on to immediately get Bullet produced, which he also wrote. And then the sequel to In the Heat of the Night, They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, in 1970. And then, he wrote some other stuff, 1973, Lady Ice and Hit. I'm not familiar with those. And then he's got just, 3 other titles in again, Crime and Passion that he was uncredited. The Next Man I've never seen, and then Fallen Angels on television, of course, a story credit on the 1999 Thomas Crown Affair, and that's it. That is for many only screenwriters. That's an amazing career that this guy had, and also he's an attorney. So
yeah, right.
What an amazing little sort of diversion he was able to put together here.
Yeah,
in that regard, it's great.
I think he clearly has some panache with the way that he puts these characters together, even if the story itself might end up being a little weak. But it's one of those things where I feel like I end up kind of just having fun with it because I enjoy these characters. But I can totally see the point, that you're making about it needing a little more meat on its bones.
What it really needs is it needs more Deadpool style fourth wall breaks. I just needed at some point Steve McQueen to look at the camera and say, "No, that's just lazy writing." That would have really, at least let's hang a lantern on it, and then we can move on. Anyway, can we talk about the love story real quick?
Yes,
because that's important because we have
it's
erotic
about
chess.
The love story. Yeah,
it's erotic chess, Andy.
Oh, it is.
That's what we need more. And believe me, in my book, this is a lock. Something around erotic board games has got to be a lock for the Saturday matinee. Something that people choose this week. Most
Austin
erotic
Powers
board
will
games
end up being
in
on
film.
There. The most obvious spoof of this scene.
This is actually a really interesting sequence. The erotic chess match. First of all, it reminded me weirdly of the Sergio Leone disgusting eating scene. If they'd had food, this was shot that way. So this was much more to my liking because there was no food, so we didn't have to deal with all the slobbering. But that's what we get here but with chess pieces. I thought it was actually lovely, wonderful macro shots of the chessboard, really interesting looking chess pieces, very classic. The board was really beautifully textured and old and weathered. It didn't fit the aesthetic of the rest of his place, and therefore it fit perfectly. You could tell that this was something that was really important to him. It looked well used, something in the family maybe. They even went so far as to make the chess match itself a replay of a real game from 1898. The game between a match between Gustav Zeisel and Walter von Walthoven. And so McQueen and Dunaway were actually playing chess. Very, very sexy chess.
Oh, it is very sexy chess.
Apparently in the Chicago Tribune review at the time, this was outed as one of the longest kisses in film history, but they didn't cite their source. So, of course, I went looking for long kisses in film, another lock for the Saturday matinee, and found that this was not the longest one. The longest was You're in the Army Now at 3 minutes and 6 seconds, which was for You're in the Army Now. I don't have a date for when that was out. Do you remember when that came out?
1941.
And then now Elena Undone in 2010 has a 3 minute and 24 second kiss.
And I remember Big Top Pee-wee had a fairly long kiss when that movie came out, of all things. I didn't time this kiss. How long was the kiss in this one?
I didn't time it either, and that's we should time it.
We should.
Well,
Now
I'm actually
now I
getting
feel
on Long Kiss for Big Top Pee Wee.
longkiss.com. Is that where you're looking?
Is that such a thing?
Are you
Are you telling me
not?
that's because if it's not a thing, then we should do it? Looks like Big Top Pee Wee was $2.29.
Okay.
Okay.
It looks like,
yes,
according to IMDb, it is a 1-minute kissing sequence between the two leads, and it took 8 hours to film over a number of days. So it's nowhere
1
near
minute.
the longest kiss.
Nowhere near the longest kiss, but at the time, right? The Pee Wee was after this movie. So
Yes. The kiss itself, though, what they did to get this is they put Haskell Wexler, the DP, on a skateboard. They wrapped him in like a black cloth, and then they just pushed him in circles around these two as they kissed. It was a very loose, kind of jazzy film with a loose, jazzy shooting style, and they were just kind of winging it and playing around, doing all sorts of crazy things, and that's what they wanted to do for this. And I guess the initial poster that they came up with had an image of the kiss on it, and initially the company said it was too sexy, and they could not release it with that poster. Now I guess they ended up doing it because all the posters I see now include the kiss, but at the initial conversations they said nope, too sexy, too much sexy on that poster.
Too much sexy poster. It's a very sexy scene, and man, Faye Dunaway just she owns it. Like, she just dominates this sequence, and I really like that because McQueen, we're used to seeing him in such rugged roles, and so it's interesting to see him here. First, we're already adjusting to the fact that he's in a suit, right? It's a different kind of dominating or chewing up.
This is
scenery.
not the blue class
type
that we've usually seen him playing at.
Right. So we're already kind of having to change our expectation of who Steve McQueen is in this in Thomas Crown, and then to see him like it's almost comedy. Like, if he pushed it any further, it would be laugh out loud sequence, like Austin Powers type kind of comedy. Watching him react to and sweat under the kind of visuals that Faye Dunaway is creating here as she's sort of caressing her own shoulder with her long nails, and like the way they shoot. I mean, she just dominates the scene
and the film. I mean, she owns everything that she does here. She's so good, so sexy. She just plays it so brilliantly, and just all of her little movements, whether it's just the way she grabs the door and leans on the doorknob, or the way she just kind of glances up and looks at McQueen. I mean, she really is just dominating her role, and it's just amazing to see what she's doing here. And this scene, just like the way that they kind of play all of that. I mean, you're right. It's so incredibly sexy. All the shots, all the moves, all the cuts, everything works really nicely. There's one shot of McQueen where he does look at her, or he's looking at the pieces, and he kind of bites his lip. And that's like the one time I'm like, that's not the shot that should have been in there, because all of a sudden it's bordering on that comedy. I almost wanted to laugh at that one shot.
Right?
But otherwise they do a great job. But it's a great scene, and I guess to your question that you initially started this with, is the love story believable? Do we like this love story? Do we care about these two? It's an interesting thing to ask, because these are characters that are kind of despicable. You know, he's essentially a rich millionaire who's so bored that, you know, he's making these silly bets when he's golfing on Sunday, and his friend asks him, he's like, that's a sucker bet. And he says, well, what else can we do on Sunday? That says everything about what kind of guy we're getting here. And he's basically robbing the bank because he just wants to stick it to the insurance company. Meanwhile, she's working for the insurance company, but she's so immoral that she will go so far as to kidnap a child in order to get a confession out of somebody. It speaks really highly to these two, and it's interesting. But because it's Faye Dunaway, because it's Steve McQueen, there's an element of likability with them already. And when we see them on screen and we see that kind of that romance between the two, I think there's an element about it that we're still drawn to. Now, the big question is, by the time we get to the ending and we find out that not only has she proven herself as the the insurance person who is going to bail on love, she turns him in, and she basically sets him up to catch him. But he does the same thing, and he sets her up so that he can make his getaway. And it's interesting because this is like the one point where these two people probably are finding the right match for themselves, where they could fall in love and be happy. But because they do what they do, they are more willing to go along with that and bail on love. And I actually think it's a really cynical ending. And if anything, that might be an interesting element that kind of came out of the 60s, is this idea of a love story that ends so cynically.
Yeah, that's a great point. That it ends cynically. It ends unresolved on both of the threads that we've been following for the last hour and 40 whatever minutes. It ends almost on a joke, right? When she reads that note and it says, "Hey, bring the money." Right. Essentially saying, I know you're going to get this because you're going to find it, and I'm on a plane, but you should meet me, and why don't you bring the money? And I think that was a great way to end it, even though it was kind of a sucker punch for the narrative of the story. And I thought that part generally worked. If as you say, if you can let go of the sort of the underwritten nature of the heist part or of the investigation, then I think this is a nice way to resolve it.
I think it's the perfect way to resolve it. I just love the ending. I love the over the top melodramatic tragic music that we have, that Michel Legrand is playing with the piano and the climbing the scales up and down the piano, and it's just so big, and her face near tears as she realizes what's going on, and he's on the plane, and it's just like it's got this great emotional swell, and I think it's actually a perfect ending for the film. And that might be one of the reasons that I end up really enjoying the film, is because the way that it ends, I think, is just such a great kind of surprise to see it ending this way. You kind of keep wondering, are they going to find a way to make this a happy love story?
Yeah.
Nope.
And they never fall prey to that. And I think that's a nice touch in this movie.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about getting it made?
Well, we talked a little bit about the screenwriter, about Alan Trustman, and how he came up with the idea and all of that. It did go to Norman Jewison. He had finished In the Heat of the Night, which was a big success for United Artists, and they wanted him to do another movie. And this is the script that I think it was the Mirish Company had purchased the rights from Trustman, and they gave it to him, and he liked it and said sure. And because he just did so well within the Heat of the Night, they kind of said, well, here's some money, go make a movie. And he went and made it. And it's kind of fun. The initial concept of the script that Trustman had was with Sean Connery playing the character, but neither Walter Mirish nor Norman Jewison really felt that was right, and they actually wanted Steve McQueen, and that's why Trustman went and kind of reworked the script. I think he watched like a whole bunch of McQueen's movies to really get a sense of him and rewrite the script. And as far as Faye Dunaway, he was trying to Jewison was trying to find the right person to play the part, and he was talking to one of his buddies, Arthur Penn, who at the time was making Bonnie and Clyde, and he was telling Norman about Faye Dunaway and let her see some of the dailies, and he just felt that she'd be perfect in the role, and brought her on board to play opposite McQueen. And I think it ended up being a really fantastic choice because they just have some amazing chemistry on screen. Plus, I mean, Faye Dunaway looks great in all those crazy 60s outfits.
Oh, the hats, Andy. They were so great. Faye Dunaway in this movie is enough to bring back hats. We need to have more hats.
Here. You know, it's funny watching her introduction when she's like walking through the airport, and you got all those different shots of her as she's walking in that fantastic giant hat. It made me it was like flashbacks to Once Upon a Time in America when we have Danny Aiello's introduction, and every time that he turns, the camera's cutting to him, and it was so fantastic, and it felt like this type of character.
It totally did.
Another element that Jewison really wanted to do with this film is film in Boston. He says that this was the first like big project to be filmed in Boston. I don't know if that's true, but the director is saying it, so I'm assuming there's some credence to it. I know they filmed in the bank. They filmed just all over the place in Boston, and he worked with the mayor and everybody to try to get access to a lot of different places and buildings and everything. So I think there's some credence to it, and it really photographs the city really nicely. There's a lot of great shots all over the place in Boston. The other interesting thing about the backstory with this is just kind of building into how this film came to end up having these multiple images on screen. Jewison had seen a screening of this short film directed by Christopher Chapman called A Place to Stand at the World Expo in Montreal in 1967. And in that film, which I think is available, I think we could probably put it in the show notes. It's this kind of journey around the world where you're seeing lots of different interesting images of people and places, and it's basically like this, where a lot of different images on the screen. And he was just crazy for it. Now, oddly enough, Steve McQueen also had seen the same short in a screening out in California. And when the two of them came together and they were talking about this technique, it was like, they both had they both had seen it. And because of that connection, they're like, we have to find a way to do this. And interestingly enough, Jewison had been using Hal Ashby, who we talked about with being there as far as directing that one. Before he was directing, he was editing, and Norman Jewison was one of the guys he was editing with. And he actually knew this guy, Pablo Ferro, who we have also talked about on this show before because he was an amazing, amazing title designer. I think we've talked about him with Dr. Strangelove. He did Bullet. He did The Addams Family. He did Men in Black. He's a guy who's done quite a few interesting title sequences. He did LA Confidential. We talked about that on the show.
Yep.
Beetlejuice. A lot of Hal Ashby's stuff, like Harold and Maude. So anyway, he's a fantastic title designer. And initially, they were going to have him do the titles, but Hal Ashby was talking to Norman about how he was playing around with this technique, and because of having seen that short film, they brought him on to help with the polo scene because they wanted to find a way to kind of spice that up because it was really long, it was really boring. And so he played around with it and came up with this really exciting polo scene. And after that, then it's just like, let's see where else we can throw it in here. And it became kind of the core element of the film. And I think it makes this film really vibrant and alive. I love it.
I do too. You mentioned A Place to Stand. It is added to the show notes. Thanks very much to the Archives of Ontario. And they put that in there. If it's anything like any other movie that we put in the link on YouTube, you should watch it really, really quick. Because it'll probably be pulled. Ontario will close and it will go out and it'll be pulled. So there you go.
Well, you know what, Pete? It's actually, there is a link for it also in the art of the title.
Yes, and I have the link. The art of the title is already in the show notes.
Right, but I mean, the link you can just, there's a window within that link of art of the title that actually has A Place to Stand link, and you can watch that.
It was already there the whole time.
Yeah.
It was calling from inside the house. Okay, what else do we need to talk about here?
Just throw in there that, of course, this is Steve McQueen, and we have talked about him quite a number of times. And we know this is a guy who likes vehicles. And so, of course, he did get to ride around in a dune buggy. And apparently, according to Norman Jewison, Steve McQueen and all his buddies actually put this dune buggy together as well.
Yeah, that's what I understand. That this ended up being. Well, I don't know. Did he walk away with this car too, or did he already?
I didn't hear
have
that,
it?
But
Like he built it. It was his car.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I just heard he and his buddies put it together and then so that he could drive it around. But I don't know if it was his.
Well, it's the Myers Manx, which is actually a hopped-up Chevy Corvair on a Volkswagen Beetle frame, and it looked like a whole lot of fun to drive around. He also had Rolls Royce, and I don't know which one that was, but Rolls Royce, whatever. Rolls Royce don't do anything for me.
A dime a dozen.
They don't. They do little for me. But Faye Dunaway's car, the car that she has seen near, was the first of 10. The Ferrari 275 GTB4 Nart Spiders. I don't know what the Nart part is. I'm not much of a car guy, but it was one of the most valuable Ferrari road cars of all time.
Norman Jewison actually owned it.
Oh, it was his car.
It was his car.
I see.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes,
well,
yes,
that was
yes.
a nice little cameo of Normie's car.
And I was just looking up that car. It looks like, NART is short for North American Racing Team.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So
yeah. Oh, listen to me. Oh, yes.
Of course
I
it
remember
was.
that
Of course
now.
it was.
Yeah.
There was a Ferrari Nart Spider that was apparently sold in 2013 for $27.5 million.
More than my Hyundai.
You should have. They should have held on to it. I wonder if Norman still has it, and he could have.
Right. Wow.
He could fund a whole new movie with that.
A whole new movie.
Indeed.
A couple other interesting people in here. It was really fun to see Yaphet Kotto in this movie. I did not know he was in this movie.
Yeah, I think it was his first movie.
What a young lad he was.
Back in the day, I shouldn't say his first movie, but his first bigger role in a film. Yeah. He had done some TV, and then he had a tiny part in a 1964 film, Nothing But a Man. But, and not that this is a big part, but it's...
No, not a big part, but very familiar now.
Very memorable, too. I just enjoy him
in
the beginning here.
Fun to see Jack Weston as Irwin. His wife was the Finker.
Boy, I tell you, what is up with that wife? Like, what's her motivation?
Don't know.
Is she like really moral and just upset to find out that her husband was involved in all of this? Or is she just after the $25,000 reward?
Well, I think just that one scene, I think that was pretty telling. Like, she already hated him.
Yeah.
Right? They were already not having a very good. And so when she found the opportunity, like that sequence, we get to see her come to terms with the fact that her marriage is over and this is the way she's going to end it.
Yeah.
She's going to send him to jail.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. That'll do, pig. That'll do.
My.
So, fun cast. Anybody else specifically you want to talk about?
Paul Burke, I mean, he's one of those faces that feels like he's born to be a police officer. And actually, I think he went, or before this, he was in Naked City as a police officer. So go figure. He's a guy who was in a lot of TV. Like he was in Dynasty and Columbo and Cagney and Lacey and Magnum PI, Santa Barbara, Fantasy Island, The Love Boat, Hawaii Five-0, Trapper John MD. I mean, you go through his career and it's just full of TV work. That's probably why he's so familiar. He just seems like one of those faces that you've probably seen a lot of times. I was never much of a 12 O'Clock High guy, but he was a regular in that series. What do you think of good old Haskell Wexler? Well, when I was first watching, so Haskell Wexler did the camera, right. And when I was first watching it, I'd kind of written a lot of the split screen off to him. And so, knowing how much kind of reshuffling they ended up having to do, how much they never intended to drop into this film, I think it was kind of a reset of my expectation of the film. I really like the work that he did here, and I'm a big fan of Haskell Wexler's other work. I mean, he's, we've already talked about
another film in the series that he did. They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. He did In the Heat of the Night. He was a cinematographer behind In the Heat of the Night and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, those are some of his very big pieces, but he's an incredibly prolific cinematographer. I think this was a solid showcase of his work. It's really fun. Like you talk about, you've said a number of times, it has this really sort of jazzy feel to it. I think it does, right? It's that improvisational kind of feeling that, especially when you get during the heist itself, and they have the smoke, those military smoke, not grenades,
flare.
The flares,
it's like the flares,
right. They did some really fun things in and around the bank and what they were going to do, and how they moved the camera in and around the heist, and moving these people around that only come into contact with one another in passing. Like I think they just handled that really artfully. And
I mean, we already talked about the chess scene. I mean, look at the way that was shot.
Yeah.
I mean, just some amazing shots, the overheads, the close-ups. I mean, I think had an incredible handle on the way to play with the camera and move the camera. There was one shot that struck me as I was watching it that I just was like, what a fun way to shoot this, where it's Eddie and Faye's character walking. I don't know. I want to say that they're by the airport or something. I can't remember where they are, but they're walking on a sidewalk. And as they're walking, the camera pans over to the reflections in the glass and finishes the scene playing out with their reflections. And it's, it was just an interesting, loose way to do it. And, not everything is motivated, but kind of like the film, it just feels like the whole thing is loose and fun. And it ends up working because that kind of creates this world that we're in.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I look at the golf sequence, when he's down in the sand.
Right.
And there's this great shot right across the green. Like we're at the green and we're just looking at McQueen's eyes as he's staring at the hole, trying to get himself out of the sand. And it's one of those sequences that stood out to me because it has the opportunity of being a hero shot. If you raise the camera a foot, you get the same kind of grass thing, but you actually see his whole head. But they didn't give us his whole head. They gave us just the top of his head and his eyes. And it's just much more fun. And that scene is supposed to be frivolous and fun. It's supposed to be like, look at this idiot. Like he has nothing else to do but, gamble extravagantly on a stupid golf wedge.
Right. And I already mentioned Michel Legrand. I mean, I think the music is fantastic, the way that it's up and down and all over the place. It just has that great French new wave sort of feel. But then there's the two songs, The Windmills of Your Mind, which Noel Harrison sings. Noel's the son of Rex. It feels very 60s and a little dated, but I really get it stuck in my head every time I watch this movie. And then, of course, there's the His Eyes, Her Eyes song that Legrand himself is singing.
What'd you think of that one?
I like it too. I end up singing that one all the time, and my wife is really tired of me singing it to her.
That's where we are with Windmills of Your Mind. I like Windmills of Your Mind better because, it's first of all, it's the opening of the film. It's over the opening credits, and I think it works really well as kind of completing the overall visual. His Eyes, Her Eyes, I find a little bit distracting in the film, just because I prefer score. And I like the music so much, but it always feels a little bit like Raindrops Are Falling on My Head in Butch Cassidy to me. So
that's an interesting comparison. I will say the instrumental of His Eyes, Her Eyes, the way that it's played during the chess scene is a really sexy version of that track. I just love the way that they played that one. It worked really nicely.
It needs to be a sexy, sexy track, Andy, because
it does. It really does.
Sexy, sexy jazz. How'd it do in award season?
The Thomas Crown Affair. This, it's a genre movie, but it doesn't mean it's not going to get any nominations. And mostly for the music. This was a big thing with this film at the time. It was getting a lot of nominations, a lot of recognition for that. The song, The Windmills of Your Mind, actually won Best Original Song for Michel Legrand, along with Alan Bergman and Marilyn Bergman, who wrote the lyrics. And Michel himself was nominated for Best Original Score, not a musical. However, he didn't win. That went to The Shoes of the Fisherman by Alex North. And I feel like we've probably talked about that in one of our other episodes, because I feel like I've mentioned that before and was like, I have no idea what that movie is.
I think so too. We should probably know what that film was, because A, 1968, B, are you kidding me? Laurence Olivier and Anthony Quinn feels like a movie we should have known, but what are you going to do, Oscar?
Yeah. And as far as the actual best song, I feel like we probably talked about this when we talked about Funny Girl, but the songs that were nominated were The Windmills of Your Mind, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Star, Buona Sera, Mrs. Campbell, and Funny Girl. How do you feel about this film winning? Do you feel like it worked?
No, I don't. This is a good song, but I look at a song like Funny Girl, I just sort of feel like that's a better one.
And I would say the same thing about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah, you know what? I'm right with you on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I totally agree. And I think that probably didn't win because of the genre with all those other ones. But I don't think Windmills of Your Mind is the winner. It's the legit winner.
Although of the song, I mean, I haven't heard Star and I haven't heard Buona Sera, Mrs. Campbell. But of those three, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and The Windmills of Your Mind are the two that I could sing without having like a reference point. Funny Girl, I can't remember the song.
But you could if you heard it. What you're saying?
No, yeah. I mean, I would recognize it once you played it, but I think that there's always something about the longevity of a track if it's something that you can just like come to right away.
Yeah.
For me, that's why Chitty Chitty Bang Bang just would take it, because it's so incredibly memorable.
It was a great score and a great
Jim
movie,
Carrey does a great job of singing it. But anyway, back to the awards. Yes. Again, like I said, the music, the original song, Windmills of Your Mind, won at the Golden Globes. The score was nominated. Michel Legrand was nominated for the Anthony Asquith Award for film music at the BAFTAs. And then at the Laurel Awards, it came in 5th place for action drama, as did Steve McQueen, who came in 5th place for male dramatic performances. I didn't know that they gave places for.
I didn't either. That's
in
remarkable.
The Golden Laurel Awards. Yeah, pretty interesting.
At the 6th place, they just hand out participation ribbons.
Right. Steve McQueen lost to the winner was Rod Steiger for In the Heat of the Night, and then obviously they weren't. They had yet to see Duck You Sucker, so. But In the Heat of the Night,
Rod Steiger accepted the award after peeing on some ants in the alley. Inspired.
Right. Sidney Poitier also was nominated. Paul Newman was nominated for Cool Hand Luke. And then 4th place was Spencer Tracy, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And this was 5th place.
Cool Hand Luke, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody eats 50 eggs. That was a nice pick this weekend. I just want to throw that back to you. Nice pick on the Sat Mat this week. How did it do at the box office?
Well, Jewison's follow-up to In the Heat of the Night was put together with a budget of $4.3 million, or $29.7 million in today's dollars. The movie was released in the heat of the summer on June 19th. I'll see what I did there.
I see what you did there, yeah. No, I was going to let
opposite
that go.
the Green Berets and the Lost Continent. The movie went on to make $14 million, or $96.9 million in today's dollars, and landed in the 19th spot of the top 20 grossing films of the year, just ahead of The Detective, actually. That gives the film an adjusted profit per finished minute of $658,000. A pretty solid spot for Jewison.
Pretty solid spot indeed. A fine, if flawed, film. And I think it's really fun. It makes me all that much more excited to watch the film next week.
Indeed.
And so I think with that, Andy, we should rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've done on this show in a fine rank-ordered list. If you swipe over in your show notes, you can tap on the word Flickchart. It should take you straight to this film, where you can add it to your catalog and see how it stands up against ours.
First up, we have The Thomas Crown Affair, or Fat City. I would go to Fat City for a more complex film that has some really interesting characters. But I feel like the breeze of watching the Thomas Crown Affair is going to push it over the top for me. So I'm going to pick that one.
Yeah, I'll go with Thomas Crown.
With a little Tommy. Thomas Crown Affair or Fargo?
Fargo.
Fargo for me. The Thomas Crown Affair or Mother?
Mother.
Yeah, I'll say Mother.
Mother.
The Thomas Crown Affair
Mother.
or The Thomas Crown Affair or Dark City?
Dark City.
Dark City, yeah.
That was not worth a sigh. That was too much. That was too dramatic.
Ponderousness.
No, that didn't even deserve to be pondered. That was instantaneous. Wow. Dark City.
Wow. The Thomas Crown Affair or High Noon?
That deserves a sigh.
Before I rewatched High Noon, I probably would have picked that, but now I'm going to pick the Thomas Crown Affair. I'm
going to do what you said.
The Thomas Crown Affair or the Lavender Hill Mob?
Now it's breezy against breezy.
I'm going to go with Thomas Crown Affair, though.
Really?
Yep.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Real sure?
Uh-huh. Real sure.
Alec Guinness, man. Alec Guinness.
I know. It's a fun movie. It is a breeze. I'm going to
go Lavender Hill Mob.
Okay.
All right.
Here we go.
1, 2, 3. Rock.
Huh?
Whew.
There you
Man,
go.
I feel like I'm protecting you with that win.
They're both breezy, easy movies. There's nothing to protect.
Agree to disagree.
The Thomas Crown Affair or The Departed?
Oh, dear.
I'm going to say The Departed.
Okay, The Departed. You're right.
The Thomas Crown Affair or Lethal Weapon?
Lethal Weapon.
Yeah. The Thomas Crown Affair or Goodbye, Mr. Chips? Say Thomas Crown Affair.
Thomas Crown.
Not that I didn't love Robert Donat in that film. Well, that lands the Thomas Crown Affair 1968 at number 177 on our chart. That's 177 out of 379. We're getting close to that 400 mark, Pete.
I know, it's coming. How'd this do on your own list?
This ended up landing at 1,025 out of 4,068, which is about a 75% spot. So
that feels about right. I think I could have predicted that. For me, it's at 319 out of 1,047, or about 70%, which also feels about right. I think I am less forgiving about some of the underwritten pieces than you, but not by much. If I'm to go by the algorithm, this flick chart is indicating that I should say that this is a 3.5 star movie on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. I'm a little bit torn. My gut's telling me, yeah, I think it's about a 3.5 star movie experience for me. I don't think it's going to crest that 4 stars, but my hunch is the quibbles. You're going to erase some quibbles in your mind, and you might give it a 4 star. Am I right?
The windmills of my mind, Pete, are spinning so much. No, I'm right at 3.5 and a like with this one.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. Yeah, I'm a like too. 3.5 stars and a like. It's a lock, Andy.
Wow, look at that.
Oof. Yeah.
Look
that was
at
good.
that. No, it's funny because I think my 3.5 is, I think I like it more than your 3.5.
Is that what we're having more of a gradient than just agreeing on stars?
That's right. My heart's more full of love.
Really complicated. Oh my God. This re-ranking episode that we've been talking about is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be 9 hours of this nonsense.
It's going to go forever.
Jeez.
Indeed
All right.
it will.
What are we doing? What are we doing next week?
We are doing the remake of this, Pete. Big surprise. This, I guess we didn't specify. This is the Movies and Their Remakes series that we're doing. We are looking at films from 1968 and their remakes. Actually, this is an interesting one, Pete, because this was one of our series that we polled our Patreon supporters for. And some of the films were 1968 films with later remakes. Some of the films were earlier films with 1968 remakes. None of those were picked. We ended up with 2 films from 1968 and their remakes. And next week, we're talking about the remake of this one from 1999. And it should be an interesting journey to check that one out. That's the Pierce Brosnan, Rene Russo film directed by John McTiernan.
I look forward to that.
Well, if you want to hear more of us, but you can't wait until next week's show, you can support us over on patreon.com/thenextreel and get access to our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee. Nay, nay.
What are we doing there? What is that? That's too much.
It just needed to be a little big.
We talk about movie news and new trailers. Plus, we go head-to-head in our weekly challenge in which we put lists of movies together that are related in some way to the movie we're discussing that week.
There are all sorts of other goodies, too. If you support us at different levels, just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
You can learn more about us and check out the detailed show notes at thenextreel.com.
You can subscribe for free in your favorite podcast app and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at The Next Reel.
And if you want to get into the conversation yourself, join our Discord channel for a whole lot of movie chat with movie lovers from around the world. You can find the link to join in the show notes or on the website.
The Next Reel couldn't happen without the hard work of Stephen Smart running Instagram.
Ben Lott runs all things Twitter.
And of course, thanks to Eli Catlin, who graciously allows us to use his song, Ragtime Instrumental, as the theme to the show. You can find out more about Eli on his SoundCloud page.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
And how? Yes, they did. We've scraped the bottom of the barrel for our well, really not even our favorite reviews, but some reviews of Amazon of what other people have said. And I've got one from Justine, who watched the movie on VHS tape. Andy, VHS tape. Are you familiar with this format? It was around in proximity to your letterbox or to your video discs. To your your vaunted discs. Although you didn't have to flip them every 5 minutes, so maybe that would not have been good for you. Anyway, Justine says, after seeing this the terrific Bronson Russo remake, oh, Andy, she's setting the bar high. I wanted to see the original, since they're always supposed to be better. This has to be one of the most idiotic movies ever made. It's not only that it's dated, but the story makes no sense. That Dunaway looks at some pictures of men who've gone to Europe recently and picks out McQueen as the robber. Can we believe that? And with no evidence, nothing to tie him to the crime, McQueen goes along with it and returns the money because some dumb blonde tells him he's guilty. Duh. This was even too dumb for the swinging 60s. I can't understand how people rave about this dumb movie. It lacks any real plot or suspense, and the chemistry between Dunaway and McQueen is about as enticing as two dead fish meeting. And that's not enticing, in case there was any concern. Two dead fish meeting, not enticing. Even in film.
People are strange. People are strange.
Why? What do you think?
Fish.
What do you think Justine got wrong in this review?
Oh,
too dumb for the 60s, Andy.
50-year-old movie. I don't know. People.
Right,
well, I've got a 2-star actually by Troy, and Troy has this to say, and it's a little, it's a little inappropriate, but here we go. A female detective gets the D from a thief and turns into a lovesick teenager. She violates her oath as a detective and destroys her career. That last bit happens after the movie ends, but it's obvious she will be punished for professional improprieties. She's a poor excuse for a cop.
God. But at least she gets an extra star.
She gets an extra star out of Troy. Oh my.
Oh dear. All right. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great movies, so many great conversations. But it's a lot of work. Producing this show week after week does require a lot behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We had some great films in Season 8 that started their lives as books or plays, and you can find all of them on our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
That's the site where listeners can find links to purchase all the source material behind the adapted films we covered, from Season 1 up through our current season.
For part of Season 8, we had a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of films from 1968.
We talked about 2001 and 2010 for our Odyssey series, both adapted from Arthur C. Clarke's novels. Man, the second one was so much better than the first, right?
Don't you even get me started. Need I bring up Under the Cherry Moon again?
Yes, also so much better.
Wait, no, that's not what I...
Planet of the Apes kicked off its series based on the novel by Pierre Boulet.
We covered Danger Diabolic and The Detective, adapted from novels for our 1968 crime films.
Wait, wasn't that The Detective the prequel to Die Hard?
They were both written by Roderick Thorpe, and yes, it's the same character in the books.
I can't believe they even asked Sinatra if he'd be in Die Hard. That would have been weird.
Once Upon a Time in America was part of our Leone Once Upon a Time trilogy, adapted from Harry Gray's novel.
And we looked at 1968 Best Picture nominees The Lion in Winter, Rachel, Romeo and Juliet, and Oliver!
We also had an Ingrid Bergman series with adaptations like Spellbound, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Murder on the Orient Express, and Gaslight.
We haven't talked about Gaslight.
Stop gaslighting me!
Dive deeper into these books and more adapted films at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations that we've covered on all the Next Reel family of podcasts and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.